Chris, we had quite a coincidence a few weeks ago. We were on the radio and on the air. I was talking about an older attorney that I knew. His name was Dan LaFevre.
Oh, yes.
He was a lawyer right here in Orlando, and he was a little bit younger than my dad, but kind of my dad's generation. And a couple of things about Dan, and one is that when I was a young lawyer, I had an opportunity to go to his office. It's right on Fairbanks here in Orlando. And looking around, and he's got a photograph of all the lawyers who were members of the Orange County Bar Association back in the early 60s. And so it amounts to maybe 75 lawyers. That's,
Not a lot.
Orlando was a small town back in the early 60s.
Wow.
And it was neat because I saw my dad in that photograph.
So cool.
He'd been a lawyer in Orlando since the mid-50s. And even at that point in time, Dan LaFevre had taken a little orange sticky dot and put that dot on any lawyer who had passed away. He was keeping track of which ones were still alive.
Wow.
And I was happy to say my dad was still alive. He was in there. And I said to Dan, if the time ever comes, I'll take that photo. If that photograph of the Orange County Bar, if it ever works out, And so here it is many, many years later, and Attorney Dan LaFevre, and I knew his son, also Dan LaFevre. He was in my high school class. And Attorney Dan LaFevre does pass away. His son does call me and says a couple of things. Number one, Tom, my dad told me that someday when he passed away, he wanted you to have this photograph of the Orange County Bar Association lawyers from the early 50s, early 60s, 75 people. He brought it over to me, just full of orange dots.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
I mean, he was one of the last ones.
Very special, and the fact that Attorney Dan wanted you to have it.
Yep.
He remembered, and you said that, and that's really awesome.
So I did take off all the orange dots, but that photograph does hang on the wall here in the office of,
Love it.
again, the lawyers that were members of the Orange County Bar Association back in the early 60s. And my dad had been a lawyer since the mid-50s, and Orlando was a small town back then. People just hard to imagine. I remember my dad telling me that the Orange County Bar Association back in the day, they used to have lunch around a big table at Gary's Duck-In, which was an old school restaurant in Orlando. Some people out there listening would certainly recognize that name, Gary's Duck-In. But getting back to the story, the other thing that young Dan LaFevre did, my contemporary, he says, Dad had a bunch of original wills in his files. I'd like to give that box or a couple of boxes of the original wills sitting in his files to you, Tom, in case anybody ever comes looking for them. I'll point them in your direction. And so we have those 2 banker's boxes of original wills that Dan LaFevre did. And so we're talking about Attorney Dan LaFevre a few weeks ago on the radio show and talking about the boxes of wills that we have. And lo and behold, we get a call from somebody saying, hey, I was Attorney Dan LaFevre's client. I'm looking for my will. I was listening to you guys talk about it on the radio. She's calling our office.
Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy. So I went and looked for it. Unfortunately, I did not find it in there.
Oh, okay. Okay.